fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to a dark edition of the Falcoholic Live presented by FanDuel. We are here for episode 355. I like to call this the cursed episode, as we're staring down the barrel of a catastrophic quarterback injury to a quarterback in Michael Penix Jr. that has already had his fair share of catastrophic season-ending injuries. And we are in a dark place both for the present and the future for the Atlanta Falcons, with way more questions than answer, and a long way to go at this point. A lot to do, a lot to consider, and can't think of anyone better to discuss it with than the crew we have here tonight. We've got, of course, as you can see, Dave Choate at the Falcoholic himself. Dave, your availability lined up for this show in particular. It feels like maybe this is just continuing the cursed show here, is that you had to be available for this one. This is the one that you come on for. So it feels dark to me, but we're glad to have you. Not saying that that's a bad thing, but
yeah, it's I figure after Christmas, the 3 interception Easton stick start, I'll get back on here and really ring it in. So
yeah,
the way my luck's going.
Yeah, that. It's a dark time. And speaking of darkness, we've got Sirius Black himself, Aaron Freeman, joining us at Locked On Falcons. Aaron, I saw the Azkaban reference too. That reminded me of your nickname in the background. But how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing all right. Easton Stick Christmas game, I'm for it. So there's nothing but positivity for me at this point in time. So that is the light at the end of the tunnel, I think, as we go through this dark time. But we'll see if we can come out better for it.
Yeah. It's like the Simpsons meme. It's like, this is the worst day of the season. It's the worst day of the season so far. We got a long way to go, folks. And, of course, as always, joining me for Falcoholic Live is Adnan Ikic at Say Which Way. Adnan, welcome back. We've been covering this shit show for weeks now, and unfortunately, the vibes have continued to deteriorate. How are you holding up?
I don't know how they do it, but it somehow keeps getting worse. Like every week, you think that we've gotten to a new low, but it turns out we just get to a new middle, and you just keep going lower. Now it feels like the lowest of the lows, but I want to say this is rock bottom, but God knows how much lower we can get. And I'm seeing everyone shaking their heads right now. But yeah, you guys remember?
You never say that out loud. Never.
just wait till Tyler Shuck drops a 34-0 bomb on the Falcons this weekend.
I forgot we played the fucking Saints this week.
Yeah, we can't even get into hate week. There's just like so much stuff going on. Yeah.
The only thing I'm hating right now is Flowery Branch, and it's like that light at the end of the tunnel that we thought was like a light the last couple of years. It turns out it was just an oncoming train. And yeah, there is no light. It's just darkness, and it's going to be darkness for a very long time.
Yeah. It's a dark time that this team enters, as we do get. I know there was a little bit of a kerfuffle with the reporting, but at the end of the day, it is a full ACL repair for Michael Penix. Minimum recovery time would be in that 9-month window, which would be approximately mid to late August at the absolute earliest to return to practice. And it could be later, guys. I mean, it's very possible that Penix isn't even participating in practice until after week 1. It's a little too early to know for sure and to speculate, but we should expect Penix to miss the entire offseason and probably most of training camp as well. And the hope is obviously going to be that he will return for week 1, but we can't even be sure of that. So the Falcons have to go into next year probably, hoping that Penix is available for the majority of the season. And I think that's a reasonable expectation, but what is he going to look like? How healthy is he going to be? All of these mechanical things that we've been talking about for weeks, that, well, he'll have this offseason to iron out those mechanical things, hopefully with a new and improved staff and quarterback coaching and all this. Well, that's not going to happen. Obviously, he's not going to have an opportunity to, he can study the new scheme and various things. It's not like he's just going to be sitting in a wheelchair all day or something. Like, he's going to be participating in meetings and be involved with the team. But in terms of on-field reps, that's not going to be an option. So, it's difficult. It's a bad situation. It's probably the worst case scenario. But today we're going to talk about, we all know it's bad, right? It goes without saying that the Michael Penix injury is bad. But tonight's topic is just how bad is it for the present, for the future of this Falcons team? Is this something that is truly catastrophic, or is this something that can be survived? And obviously they're going to survive. It's not like the team's going to fold, but, you know, are we going to survive as fans? Are we going to be able to stomach the product that we witness on the field for the foreseeable future? That's going to be our discussion point tonight. And we're going to save, we're probably going to spend most of the show, if not all the show, talking about Penix and the implications of everything going on there. There will be a full game preview for the Saints game. We're probably not going to get, I'm guessing, to much of the Saints game. As we said, we're kind of like, wow, it's hate week. Oh, we're not even talking about it. So we will be getting to that. There will be a full game preview where I'll break that game down in more detail. Still trying to see if I can line up a Saints guest for us as well. But most of tonight, we're going to be talking about the bigger, more pressing issues, because at this point, the 2025 season really doesn't matter. So it is a difficult time, and I know a lot of people have takes and opinions, and a lot of those takes and opinions are going to be shared tonight. And obviously, if you have them, throw them in the chat. We appreciate everyone for continuing to be here and supporting the show despite the malaise that has overtaken this franchise. Shout out to George Costanza to get us started tonight with the $2. Says, so here's my big brain idea. Okay, I haven't read this before I'm reading it, so George, don't lead me astray here. Okay, we fire the coaching staff. We bring in Prime, a.k.a. Deion Sanders. The prodigal son returns. He gets Shedeur here through some kind of black magic, I imagine, some kind of wizardry. He just convinces the Browns to part with Shedeur, which it seems like that actually wouldn't be that hard, because it seems like the Browns don't really want Shedeur, so I'm not really sure why they drafted him. Then we get on primetime every week because of Deion Sanders, and then Shedeur provides us the entertainment while Penix recovers, Super Bowl bound. Well, George, that is a big brain idea. I will grant you that. I don't think it's that crazy that the Falcons could sniff around Deion Sanders, given the connection and given that I'm not sure, what type of candidates we'll be attracting. So I will say it's an interesting idea, to say the least. But before we get into who's getting fired, because I know we all have opinions on that, let's sort of talk about sort of this initial stuff. If you want my take on it, you guys can watch the show I did on Monday with Trey Sean, where we really went, over an hour talking about this. Tonight's going to be mostly about getting some other takes in here. And we'll, of course, start with our guests. And, Dave, I know you just wrote a big article about the quarterbacks that are out there. We've obviously been talking a lot about sort of just where this team stands. But, initial thoughts sort of on the Penix injury and where it leaves the Falcons at this point.
In a bad place. I think that's probably fair to say, right? It's really striking to me that, I wrote something a week or two ago about how the Falcons keep misjudging their moment, and, luck goes against them, but also their planning goes against them. And this is a case of that, where you spent a huge amount of draft capital and money to sort of solve the quarterback position for, you hope, a decade. And here we are, not even 2 full seasons in, and you don't know what the future holds for Penix anymore, which is really devastating for him and the team. And that probably the first chance they get, they're going to part ways with Kirk Cousins. So you're staring at potentially, maybe even likely, a new starting quarterback for at least part of the 2026 season, after you sort of declared and tried to make sure that you would not have to deal with a problem at the quarterback position again. And to me, this is just how the pendulum swings for this team. They go all in to try to solve one need, and then something else pops up, and they didn't have the foresight, they don't have the resources to take care of it. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they navigate this, knowing that they're going to want Penix out there on the field at some point in 2026 if they can swing it, well, trying to protect him so that he doesn't rush back, but also knowing you can't just throw the season away, right? You have to find another quarterback that you're comfortable starting, preferably not just for 2 games, 4 games in 2026, but considerably longer if you need to. And it's not I think the general reaction to the article I wrote this morning was gross, ew, that sort of thing. Like, it's not a great offseason to need a quarterback. The options out there are not tremendous, and your draft capital to get one, either through the draft or via trade, is more limited because you don't have a first round pick. So this really is a catastrophic situation, and it just feels so cruel and so Falcons that, Penix was having that amazing first half where he looked really good. He looked to have ironed some stuff out. The Falcons were in the driver's seat, and then he gets hurt and it just all goes to hell. And that's really been the story of the 2025 season. Everything has gone to hell, but nothing has been worse than this, given that Penix, whether you believed he was the guy or not, the Falcons were going to give him every chance to prove it. And now I am worried that he's never actually going to get the chance the way that we would have hoped. So that's a huge bummer. I'm pretty bummed out.
Yeah, I certainly feel for Penix most of all, because it seems like it's going to be impossible for him to really get a fair shake. I mean, whatever that looks like to you. At this point, this was the one injury that he couldn't have. He couldn't have another ACL tear, especially not this early in his career. And it's going to be difficult to trust that going forward. And there's no easy way to get around that. So it's just very, very sad and unfortunate for all parties involved. But I think Penix most of all, despite, the fact that we're going to be talking mostly about the team here. I mean, this hurts him more than it does the Falcons, I'm sure. But Aaron, I know you've been talking about this quite a bit as well, but sort of where are you now with the team and this injury to Michael Penix Jr.?
Yeah, I think, Dave's article that he wrote last week, I think was an excellent one, sort of outlining the better part of the last, decade and sort of the missteps and the constant sort of like, we're going to retool and reload. And this time it's going to work. And they've been trying that for 8 years and it hasn't worked. And, I don't think it's a positive or anything like that, but my hope is that this will now give the team the opportunity to be like, okay, we've been trying this for 8 years. We started out trying to get back to the Super Bowl with Dan Quinn and Thomas Dimitroff. That didn't work. And then we hired Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith to kind of take it to the next level. That didn't work. And then their strategy with Desmond Ridder and all that stuff didn't work. And then Raheem was like, well, we already built the roster and we just got to get the quarterback situation right. And that's going to work. And that, as Dave just outlined, hasn't worked. And so now I think the challenge for the Falcons is like, they're kind of back to the beginning and they're going to have to start over. It could get darker before it gets lighter, so to speak, what is it? It's darkest before the dawn.
I know where you're going with this. Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like, I think there's a way for the Falcons to come out of this, but it's really going to rely on them making the right decisions. And as I'm sure we will all spend the next hour talking about, there's no confidence based off of their history that they're going to make the right decisions. And I think certainly that is the case with the current people that are running the team. Whether you want to talk about ownership, whether you want to talk about team presidents and CEOs, whether you want to talk about the head coach and the GMs and all that sort of thing. And so, my hope for the Falcons that will give me some optimism for the future is that they kind of do a clean sweep, obviously not with ownership, but with pretty much everybody else to kind of, all right, well, we tried it and let's start over. And like, that doesn't necessarily guarantee success in the future because so much of that depends on hiring the right people and the right GM and the right head coach and the right quarterback. And there's no guarantee that any of those things will go that way. So that's the one thing I can say in terms of the future that gives me some optimism, but it's not a lot of trust with the Atlanta Falcons that they have garnered with me. And I'm sure most of the people watching and listening to us talk about this. And with Michael Penix, I think, nothing would please me more for him to have the comeback story of the decade next year, coming off of, his third ACL tear, his fifth season ending injury in 8 years, and come back and, put the cape on, bust out the training room and basically say, I'm going to lead this team to the postseason. I've seen some people wondering like why myself and maybe others or writing off that possibility. And, I've seen Joe Burrow his name thrown out there because Joe Burrow suffered an ACL or maybe multiple ligament tears, if I'm not mistaken, his rookie year around this time, and was cleared to come back ahead of training camp and, played that following year. And obviously the Bengals went to the Super Bowl that year. And again, I would love to have a repeat of that sort of situation with Michael Penix. It's just hard to have that at this point in time, given his history, given, the fact that Joe Burrow was the number one pick for the Bengals. They had a clear incentive to stay invested in Joe Burrow that we don't quite know if the Falcons are going to have that same incentive, given Michael Penix was a top 10 pick, a controversial top 10 pick. Who's going to be the people in the building making the decisions on whether to stick with Michael Penix? Is it still going to be Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot? I think probably most people watching, listening, and those of us talking don't necessarily want to see that, but given Arthur Blank's history, there's a decent chance that he may be like, hey, this season went down the tubes because of injuries, not because of incompetence elsewhere in the building. And if that's the case, then sure, then this regime is going to run it back next year, expecting Michael Penix to pull a Joe Burrow again. I don't think I need to explain why no one should be optimistic about that outcome. And then if you bring in new people in the building, whether it's a new GM, whether it's a new head coach, whether it's both, those people are going to have little to no obligation to be married to Michael Penix in the future because he's not their guy. And then is Arthur Blank going to hire someone specifically with the mandate? Well, you have to fix Michael Penix. And what's the trickle down domino effect of that in terms of who's going to be willing to accept the job when you're having a quarterback thrust on? So these are all the questions that we sit here pondering. And that's why, if people are wondering why people like myself are sort of looking at this situation as a not so good situation with more questions than answers. And to me, one of them isn't necessarily, well, we'll just run it back with Michael Penix, given all these unknowns as we sit here today. And so that's kind of the challenging thing at this point for me, of trying to figure out, okay, what's the plan? What's going to work? What can you legitimately sell to get this fan base back invested? And those are all sort of open questions, but we'll see how they proceed forward. I think the one thing for me is at least we know that Michael Penix is going to be out. But I was telling Kevin before we jumped on here that my worry was that they were going to string us along and be like, oh, well, we'll wait and see how Kirk does over the next 4 games. And then, Penix will come back or something like that. And then it was just like, all right, man, whatever. But yeah, I think having at least a little bit of finality on at least the short term that, okay, the Falcons at the very least are going to have to bring in a bridge option between now and when Penix gets here, and then whatever they have to figure out to do in 26 and 27 and beyond still remains to be seen. But at least we have an answer, but it may not be a good answer.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think there's certainly that would have been the ultimate, troll job by the Falcons staff in terms of the injuries. It's like, oh yeah, well, we just didn't say Darnell Mooney had a broken collarbone. So it's like, oh yeah, we just didn't say that, Michael Penix tore his ACL. I mean, we put him on IR. What do you guys want? Like, information? I mean, so we didn't go down that path, but that did cross my mind. It's like, oh, are they just going to like refuse to say what happened? And then at the end of the season, they'll be like, oh yeah, he tore his ACL. Yeah. But Raheem would just say it like casually in a radio interview or something, like not even make a big thing out of it. But yeah, we don't have to go down that path. At least we have some clarity about the timeline to at least some small extent, but we can move forward with that knowledge at the very least. And Adnan, I'll put the same question to you. Where are you at with this injury and sort of your thoughts on where the team stands?
Well, the team doesn't stand in a good place, and this injury just felt like a worst case scenario this year for Michael Penix. Like, we went into this season with a lot of questions surrounding Michael Penix in terms of, can he be the franchise quarterback? And I feel like we've now ended Michael Penix's season still with as many questions as we had coming into it. And I feel like that's a really, really bad place to be, because with Joe Burrow, as an example, and I thought about that example today, and that example didn't come up in my mentions, but Aaron said it came up in his, and I'm not surprised that people are trying to, cope with, oh well, Joe Burrow did it. There's plenty. I feel like Joe Burrow, for one, I mean, he was a couple years younger than Penix. He was the number one overall pick, but I feel like more than anything, Joe Burrow sort of established himself before that injury as, like, you knew he was going to be the guy, like, in Cincinnati moving forward, like, based on not just the fact that he was the first pick, but surely based on his performance as well. Like, of course, it wasn't the Joe Burrow that he's blossomed into, but for a rookie, like, he had a really strong season up to that point, given what they were working with in Cincinnati as one of the worst teams in the NFL. With Michael Penix, if I wanted to put a number on it, I would say the, like, chances, like, for me, like, at least, of him, like, being that franchise quarterback went from like 45% before Sunday to now like 15% after this injury. And I know that sounds very dramatic. And I know people are going to come here and say, oh, well, it's just an ACL injury. We have modern medicine. Players have come back from ACL injuries before. For me, it's not physically. For me, it's more so mentally, because one of my biggest gripes with Michael Penix, and one of my biggest worries about Michael Penix, in terms of can he be a franchise quarterback, is more mental, because I feel like we've all seen it. He's very, very apprehensive to contact. And how can you not be? He had 4 season-ending knee injuries before this. Now this is number 5 in 8 years. But that's where all the intentional groundings came from. That's where him refusing to leave the pocket, even though it was sort of warranted, and to use his legs, refusal to use his legs. That's where that came from. I still remember in that Colts game, I think it was like the 3rd and 11. I think it was in overtime, where 2 Colts players got in the backfield. And I've never seen a quarterback do this, where he just dropped to both knees. Like, he could not, like, he just dropped, like, right down like an anchor. And seeing that, I'm like, man, like, he really is terrified of, like, any contact. And I feel like it's just going to be worse when he comes back. And to me, I feel like that's like the biggest issue for Penix, to overcome that mental hurdle. Like, I feel like those injuries were always in the back of his head, and now it's like it's going to be so much worse now moving forward, because he did now suffer this ACL injury, and moving forward, he's now had 5 season-ending knee injuries. It's his 3rd ACL injury, albeit it's his first one on this specific knee. But now the margin for error is so much smaller, because it feels like 2026, when he comes back in that back half of the season, that's going to be sort of the final audition for Michael Penix, in terms of, is he going to be the guy here or not? And, the Falcons have to go into next year with a bridge quarterback. Dave outlined some of those options in his article. He's already mentioned it. The options aren't so good. 2026 already feels like it's going to be a lost season, like, just sitting here. And I don't trust the Falcons brass one bit to make the correct decisions, and to sort of thread that needle for this team to come out of this on the other side. Like, there is nothing that Arthur Blank has done that warrants any trust. And there is nothing that this regime has done that warrants one iota of trust from this fan base. And I feel like if you still trust this fan base, if you still trust Arthur Blank, that's more so blind homerism than anything else, which fair. Like, I'm not here to judge it, to police anyone of how anyone's going to be a fan. Like, you be a homer, put the blinders on, do whatever you want. My thing is, just don't, like, come and tell us that are being realistic that we're doing something wrong, because we're realistically saying that they shouldn't be trusted. But yeah, Penix is going to have his chance in 2026 without working on those mechanics, without working in the offseason, without getting that very, very crucial offseason program that was going to be huge for him, this summer. And it's sort of like, if he doesn't show it next year, even as unfair as it might be, then the Falcons really need to move forward with that mindset of we have to find a quarterback in 2027 and beyond. There's not really that much time to waste when it comes to that, and it sucks, and I hate it for Penix, and it's not fair. But it's the NFL. Sometimes you need that luck. Sometimes this is a very cruel and unfair sport. It's been a very cruel and unfair sport to Michael Penix specifically, and it really sucks for the Falcons. But this is sort of the timeline we're in, and turns out it wasn't darkest before the dawn. It was just darkest before there was more dark in this case, and who knows how dark it's going to be moving forward.
Yeah, very, very dark times. A lot of good things to consider there as we sort of continue this talk. I know we had some questions, so we'll get to those real quick before we continue on. We got Alex Foster with the $5. Thank you, Alex. Says, sorry, guys. I have to have some hope for Penix, even if it's actually cope. I have to keep myself sane with some optimism. That's fine, Alex. I mean, I think at Penix is probably going to get... I mean, I would be surprised if Penix isn't the, named starter for 2026 at the very least. He may not end up starting, week 1 because of the timeline, but Penix is going to get 2026, I would say, but instead of 2026 being a building, growth year for him where you're hoping he cements himself, it's kind of like he now has to prove that he is worth investing in long term beyond what we would have typically wanted, because at this point it's probably going to be he now needs to convince a different GM and coach to get behind him long term, when they may have to decide between sort of committing to him or going and getting their quarterback in the 2027 NFL draft, depending on how the 2026 season goes. But to some extent it's still in his hands, and that if he can get back healthy to start the season and comes in and has a strong 2026, then I mean they'll probably give him a shot to remain the starter. But he's got to play. I mean, this year, I think ultimately Penix was fine. He was about what I expected in terms of up and down play. Unfortunately, I think maybe his best game against the Panthers was got interrupted, and we'll never know. I was certainly hoping that would be another strong game and he would finish the season strong. We'll never know now, and now he's going to have to really just play strong football in 2026. It can't continue to look like this, or team's going to move on. We got Corey with the $2 saying, if from this point forward, if anyone ever asks you if you've been in an abusive relationship, you can answer yes. Yeah, I mean, it certainly feels that way at this point. We got Guy Fieri, a.k.a. Solaire, with the $2 saying, oh, Falcoholics, there was a time I, too, thought I watched for wins. Yet over time I have seen the truth. The red helmets hold all. Until they return, the draft takes are all we have. Come, fellow Falcoholics, feast with me. Become one with the mocks. That was well written, Solaire. I know Solaire's been jonesing for draft takes ever since the draft ended. So yeah, we can't hold him off. Yeah.
Second round mocks this year.
Yeah, it's going to be extra spicy second round mocks this year. Yes, Solaire, we're going to get to it, and we'll have to get to it sooner or later, I'm sure. And then we got Furball with the $10. Thank you, Furball. Appreciate that. Is there any way Penix could be back for week 1? If there's an option where we need to make the right decision for 2026, Raheem has to go. I don't trust him. What's the possible way he gets fired sooner? I mean, I think that there is a chance Raheem is fired before the end of the season. I mean, I think if they continue to lose, there's no way he survives much longer. But if they could pull off some wins, I think the most likely scenario is that that Raheem probably finishes out the season and then he gets fired. Just because Arthur Blank doesn't typically like to fire in season. But ultimately, I think that Raheem will be fired. I still don't believe that they can keep him. I think he's become just too toxic. Not that I think he's a toxic person or anything like that. It's more like he is sort of public enemy number 1 at this point in Atlanta. And I don't really think that there's any way they can spin keeping him. And should teams do what fans want all the time? No, but I think this has become so untenable that they would have a fan riot, not an actual riot that takes place outside Flowery Branch, but whatever the sort of overall equivalent of that would be in the sort of fan cognoscenti of Falcons fans. Like there would essentially be a revolution, like a revolt against this team. I don't think they could convince anyone to get behind Raheem Morris at this point. I mean, it would. The only way I could see that happening is if like they go on a big win streak here and are somehow competitive at the end of this season. I mean, at this point, that obviously seems like ridiculous, but that's the only way I could see Raheem saving his job is if they go on enough of a win streak. I'm not saying they have to win out because I don't think Arthur Blank would make that happen, but they would have to like get to at least 8 wins or 9 wins to probably save Raheem's job. And I don't think that's possible. So I think he ends up getting fired here. But let's continue on this topic, which, you know, I'll go to you first with this one, Aaron. Just what's your overall thought process on this, where the team stands right now in terms of the coaching staff? Because the Penix injury is sort of like obviously its own thing, but as much as like maybe Arthur Blank or Raheem might try to convince people that like, oh, injuries derailed us, this team was 3-7, was 3-6, I guess you could say, before Penix got hurt. So what's your sort of temperature check on the likelihood of this regime to stick around? Where are you at there?
Yeah, I don't think they should stick around again. Like fire everybody. Basically, it's like if Arthur Blank just goes through the building and basically like, okay, Tori McElhaney and all the reporters, y'all can stay. Social media team will keep you there. Secretaries, janitors, y'all can stay. Everybody else, you can just get out. So that's what I would probably wind up doing if I was in Arthur Blank's shoes. I'm going to be curious to see if Arthur Blank pulls the trigger on that. I would bet that he does clean house in terms of GM and head coach in both Raheem and Terry Fontenot. It feels like we're on track for that. But again, going back to that article that Dave wrote, it's one of those things where you just cannot feel confident with this team being able. We know Arthur Blank wants to be a stable organization. The problem that has plagued the Falcons over the last 8 years is instability. And so, you don't promote instability by firing people, or you don't promote stability by constantly changing coaches every 2-3 years or whatever. And so I think there's going to be a drive within that building. And there may be some people that have high positions that may or may not be involved in football that will try to steer Arthur Blank to staying the course and being patient. And Kevin, as you outlined, if they can pull off a couple of wins here at the end of the season, potentially without not only Michael Penix, but potentially without Drake London, because, the current reports are he'll miss a game, but it's based off of Brock Bowers and Ricky Pearsall's PCL injuries that Drake London, they missed basically 6 weeks with those injuries. And that could also be an opportunity. But hey, if Raheem can circle the wagons and get Kirk Cousins and Darnell Mooney and Kyle Pitts the ball out in these last 7 games, maybe that's enough for Arthur Blank to say, hey, well, when Penix comes back and we can add a couple of pieces and we can kind of retool this thing and run it back. And again, like, do I think that's the likely outcome? No, but nothing I've learned over the years of covering this team. Anytime I publicly say that will never happen, it always happens. So I've learned my lesson enough to never really trust in the Falcons making the right decision. But kind of my hope for this team is, they're going to fire everybody. They're going to give a brand new GM and head coach, knowing that they're not set up for success in year one. It's kind of a rehash of 2021 when they brought in Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith initially. But unlike that situation where those guys came in with the expectation of, we're going to win with Matt Ryan, we're going to win with Calvin Ridley, we're going to take what Dan Quinn couldn't do and take it to the next level. Because remember, infamously, I can't remember which one said it, but they said rebuild is not in our vocabulary. And that was their mantra in the offseason. And then we got a month into the season and they were like, maybe we should start rebuilding. And so, my hope is that a new regime will come in without that sort of mandate of like, you got to make it work with Matt Ryan. You got to make it work with the pieces we've already assembled. You're not going to necessarily tear down this roster overnight, but it's just kind of the pitch I would have if I was Arthur Blank to any new decision makers in the building is, you're going to have the runway to do what you're going to have the power and agency to do what you want with this roster. There are going to be no mandates. We will highly recommend building it around Bijan Robinson and Drake London. Other than that recommendation, you're not obligated to, stand to that. And if you decide that we're the 2025 New York Jets and we have to start shipping off some of our superstars in order to reset this thing because, we're going to waste their primes playing on bad teams and might as well just blow it up. If that's the choice you have to make and you feel obligated to make, then you have, the agency to do that. Again, I'm not looking forward to that day, but to me, that's, I think, the only way that you can move forward and expect the Falcons to come out of this rosier. But whether or not the Falcons are going to do that, I think is very much a toss-up.
Yeah, and it's sort of like, what does Blank want? Like, does Blank want that? I agree with you. I think the only way to get a real coach and GM in here is to give them the flex, like to make it a clean slate for them. Like, we're not going to put any expectations or like rules around this. Like, we want the best candidate possible. Tell us what you want to do. And if we agree, then we'll hire you, that sort of thing. And I think if they put too many rules on it or too many demands, like you have to, like you're going to build around Penix and this core and you have no choice, or, you have to keep X, Y, and Z. That's non-negotiable. Like, I think plenty of candidates will be fine with like Bijan, Drake, and a lot of these core players sticking around and being a part of the future. But some of them may need to get moved. Like you said, I mean, we've got cap issues. We've got a 2026 season that looks dead in the water. If Penix is not ready to play, there's not really much hope of getting like a reasonable quarterback in here other than Penix next year. So, it may be a sort of low-key tank situation. And if you're going to convince a coach worth their salt and a GM worth their salt to come in and sign up for that, you have to give them that runway. So I think it really comes down to Blank and his willingness to go along with it. But I don't think it's outlandish or crazy, and I think I would support some bold moves with the roster. Maybe not, signing a quarterback to 100 million guaranteed and drafting one. Maybe that's too bold. Maybe we've found out that maybe that is too far. That might be too far. I'm getting word actually that it is definitely too far, and it may have ruined the Falcons for at least 3 to 5 years. But just don't do that. We can do bold. Bold is okay, but maybe we don't do that again. But Dave, sort of same question to you. Where are you at with this coaching staff in the future here?
Yeah, I think like everybody else, in some ways, I kind of feel bad for Morris because of the timing. Like, he's done a lot of this to himself. I think the coordinator hires, at least his 2 initial ones, were not stellar. Obviously, Jimmy Lake was a complete disaster. Like, let's not sugarcoat that one. But I do think also he kind of stepped into a situation where a team had been built one way. Maybe with ownership pressure, they, made the wrong decision with quarterback. And I think sort of the direction this team has been taking, at least on defense, which is more his specialty, has been a positive one. They are moving that in the right direction. The pass rush is improving. You can see the type of player they're looking for. It would kind of be a shame to fire the staff and then maybe reset what you're trying to do on defense after you've made the investments you've made. But I do think that he's made a ton of tactical errors. I think that, he has done things with sort of obscuring injuries that are unnecessary and have blown up in the franchise's face. And I think you kind of can't fire Terry Fontenot without also cleaning out the coaching staff. And I think that at this point, it's fairly clear that you have to move on from the GM. It will have been 5 seasons with him at the helm, and there's some good pieces here, but there's never been anything resembling like a cohesive contending team. And I think you can trace a lot of that back to the front office and the general manager. At this point, there have been 2 different coaches. And if you're tied at the hip with both of them, as has been the constant message out of Flowery Branch, presumably like you would have been building towards something that would have worked out, and that just hasn't happened. And again, has there been injury luck here? Has there been coaching miscues? Sure, but I just don't think after the last 5 years that you can justify keeping Fontenot. I think considering this roster was supposed to contend, whether we think it was good enough to or not, you probably can't keep Morris. I think you have to start over. And I think you look for a coaching staff that is capable of working with some of the really good pieces you have rather than trying to blow it up. I don't think Blank is going to sign up to blow this up. I don't. I think it's been clear since 2016 and maybe even well before that, ever since he took over the team, that, you know, by the time he's hired a new head coach or a new GM, by like year 3, year 2, they've had some sort of success, and he's impatient for that, especially after 8 years of losing. So you look at this and you say, okay, we think we have, and this is the balancing act for me, right? Like, we think we have some good pieces, and they do, but we don't have a good enough roster. It's not deep enough. It's not filled in at all these positions. You have some real question marks around older players, borderline starters, etc. So you can't, even if you want to have this Falcons team back in the playoffs in a year or two, and you're not going to sign up to blow things up, you can't put too many restrictions on it either. You have to be able to say, this new staff coming in, whoever they might be, top to bottom, you don't have Michael Penix until midway through next year, maybe longer. You might not be able to count on him as your franchise guy. You also don't have a first round pick to go draft your hand-picked quarterback this coming year. You have to figure this out in the interim and try to come up with a solution that keeps us afloat. And I think that ultimately Blank has to be able to sign up for a year or two of pain, as much as he doesn't want to do that at this point. There's no way he wants to say we're going to have 10 straight losing seasons in service of something better. But I just don't see a realistic way to keep the staff knowing that they're going to lose next year and you're probably going to fire them, or to bring in a new staff and to try to say we have to be competitive. We can't call it a rebuild, etc. Like, there's no more half measures. There's no more trying to do the middle road. You just have to be able to say, these are the players that we want to build around, and see what the reaction is to whoever you're bringing in. But ultimately, I think it'll be the end of the year, but I do think Blank will clean house, and I just wonder who they'll bring in. I really have no idea.
Yeah, I know there was some buzz that it's not just Fontenot, it's not just Morris, even McKay could be on the hot seat, which I know fans have been clamoring for an eternity. I personally don't believe it, although I do. Greg Allman is very, very in tune, I believe, with what's going on in the NFC South, and I know Ari Myrov was talking about this being the hottest seat in the NFL at the moment. So, how much of that is, truly accurate and how much of that is just being spread, we probably won't know until these moves actually happen. But there's certainly growing discontent, it seems, in Flowery Branch, perhaps to all levels of this operation. But yeah, I mean, before we kind of continue, Adnan, I know we've talked a lot about coaching changes here. We know I know your stance on Raheem Morris, but is there anything else you want to add with regards to where the staff is at this point?
Yeah, look, man, I was team clean house at the end of last season. Like, I envisioned this being a lost year had they kept Morris and Fontenot together, because I feel like last year was the mandate. Like, last year was the year where it's like, all right, you have to make the playoffs. And the whole point of bringing in Morris was, all right, well, he's not a rookie head coach, and you're not going to go through those rookie head coach growing pains, and that, we've got to make the playoffs. And they didn't meet that mandate. And then I guess, like, they just decided to move the goalposts on it, and it just sort of didn't matter. And here we are in another lost season, and possibly even more like lost than we could have imagined, because now this year, remember, they mortgaged the upcoming first round draft pick. If that doesn't tell you that this was a win now season, then nothing will. Like, they are down a first round pick this coming year, and that could be a very, very juicy draft pick. Like the way this team is going right now with this leadership, with these injuries, they could be gift wrapping a top 5 pick to the Los Angeles Rams, and if not top 10, then certainly, perhaps a top 10 pick. So yeah, I'm absolutely team clean house. And I mean team clean house, like Terry Fontenot had no business even getting a 5th year, let alone now getting another season after another catastrophic losing season this year. I don't know. I don't understand the arguments for keeping Terry Fontenot moving forward because, oh, this team has talent. He drafted Bijan and Drake London. Great. He drafted a running back in the top 10 and it turned into a hit. Congratulations. Like, I'm baffled by some of what's been going on in my Twitter mentions today, but that's neither here nor there. What I would like to see happen is what Aaron mentioned: clean house completely. Take Rich McKay gone, Fontenot gone, Morris gone, every assistant gone. Like, get rid of them, and moving forward, stop cutting corners on a rebuild. Like, well, with the next coaching staff, with the next GM, with the next head coach, give them the runway and give them full autonomy behind football decisions and let them rebuild this the only way you really should rebuild, which is from the ground up, brick by brick. It's going to be painful. We're going to have probably not only a painful 2026, but probably a painful 2027 before we finally see some light at the end of the tunnel. But that's what this franchise has done. That is the hole that Arthur Blank has buried this franchise underneath. And you don't get a get out of jail free card. There is nobody you can bring in that's just magically going to turn you into a playoff team. You have to let the football people or the brains behind the football decisions make the football decisions and give them their runway and let them build this the way that it should be built. I am so sick of Arthur Blank trying to cut corners on a rebuild. Like, I am so sick of regimes coming in here, gaslighting the fan base, telling us from the very beginning and every single season since that, oh no, we're not rebuilding. We're going to be competitive this year. When a blind man can tell, looking at this roster, that this was never going to be a competitive roster. This was not going to be a competitive roster in 2022. We had Desmond Ridder here as the quarterback in 2023. And you keep trying to sell us on this idea of this team is going to be competitive. This team is going to be competitive. And there's a small handful of people that believe you year in and year out. But we're getting to the point where even those people can finally see the forest from the trees. But what I do think is going to happen is what Dave mentioned, and that's Arthur Blank is going to be impatient. And I get it. Arthur Blank is 83 years old. Arthur Blank, something seems to have changed in him since that abomination happened in the Super Bowl. And since Atlanta United also won that title in 2018, where he's sort of become obsessed. Like, he's become obsessed with reaching the pinnacle with the Falcons. And I get it. Like, this is his project. Let's be honest. He doesn't really care about Atlanta United as much as he does about the Falcons. Sure, he's the Atlanta United owner. He'll, be there. He'll come to the games here and there. But, like, this is his baby. Like, this is the success that he wants. And I don't doubt that Arthur Blank wants to succeed. And I don't doubt that Arthur Blank wants this franchise to succeed, probably even more than we do, because obviously he has a direct stake behind it. But he's going about this completely the wrong way. And I know he wants the Falcons to win a title in his lifetime, but you cannot keep cutting corners. Like, this obsession has hindered this franchise way more than it's helped it. And at this point, I have no trust in him to sort of set his ego aside and to go through the very painful but very necessary rebuilding process that this franchise has been needing for years. And honestly, that's more than anything what makes me truly believe that the person holding this franchise back more than anyone is Arthur Blank, despite the fact that he wants to see them succeed probably more than anyone else.
Yeah, it's sort of the curse of his own ambition and belief in this team. It's almost like he believes too much in this roster and this staff, and um doesn't see the holes, doesn't see that, like, oh no, this whole thing is a house of cards, and we don't have enough support. We didn't glue these cards together. This is just going to fall over as soon as you blow on it. That it's not spoiler alert, if you tap the house, it just falls over. But it just, yeah, I could see that angle for sure. And it does feel like they've been trying to put off a rebuild. They haven't done it as aggressively as a team like the Saints, who have obviously like continued to just spin and done it in such an aggressively, like, just nonsensical way that it almost borders on insanity there. The Falcons have been doing the same thing, more or less, just less irresponsibly, although, we'll see how that turns out in the long run. But at this stage, they are coming to a point where we've reached sort of an inflection point where this might be time to take a step aside and look closely at what this is that we've built, and ask the hard question of, like, can you win a Super Bowl with this core, or do we need to start over? Because this could be our opportunity to start over. 2027, everybody says this to some extent with these draft classes, right? 2027 is been lifted up as this, like, mythical draft class. We've heard rumors that NFL teams are going to try to hoard 2027 picks because there's just all these stars in it, and you never know what to believe with that, right? I mean, who knows who's going to come out, who's going to get hurt, how it's going to play out. I mean, obviously, it never goes as expected, but I think one of the more responsible things you can do is treat 2026 as the start of a rebuild. You don't have a quarterback, so the best thing you could do is get yourself in position to draft one, find out what on your roster you should keep and what you should let go, and then go into 2027 with a full war chest and the ability to put a team around a potential top quarterback in that draft that's not going to get that quarterback murdered or get that quarterback's confidence shattered with a lack of weapons or anything else. Like, I think with a couple years to prepare, you could usher in a new quarterback into a good situation, hopefully with a good coaching staff as well. But that's sort of my rosy outlook here. We'll see if the Falcons can accomplish anything similar to that. We got a $2 donation from a Bixis. Thank you. A Bixis says, think if Penix plays decent in 2026, you can sell the idea of moving forward with him. If you want a real fan riot, just draft a bust in 2027 as fans watch Penix go to a new team and have a Baker-type bounce back while we suffer yet again. Also feel that Raheem may come back. Well, I certainly hope none of those things happen, except that Penix plays better than decent. I hope Penix absolutely balls out next year and gives this team, a really hard decision in 2027. And that he's good, and at the very least, maybe if you decide to go draft a quarterback, that you could flip him for something, and he'll get a chance to start elsewhere. But that's probably too optimistic. We'll see what actually plays out. But to close out the show, because we've done a lot of depression here, and it's been warranted. Let's be honest. I want to ask, and Dave, I'll go to you first on this one. What's sort of your path forward? What do you want to see happen? Now that the chips are sort of on the table, right? We know Penix is going to miss at least, all the entire offseason. We're probably going to get a new staff and GM in here in all likelihood. What do you want to see happen? What's your sort of vague outline? You have sort of a vague outline of a plan here. What would you like to see happen for the Falcons here in the near future?
Yeah, I think and so much does depend on what the timeline ends up being for Penix and what the new staff, let's say, if they do turn this thing over, their level of belief in him is. But what I would really like to see is, over the last two draft classes and off seasons, they've put a lot of time and energy into the defense, right? So there are still major holes there. There are pieces you're going to have to replace, but especially up front, you've put some significant draft capital into this pass rush, this group, and I think there's something to build on there. So I would try to do the opposite of what the Falcons did basically throughout the Dimitroff era, and now we build out from the line, from the defensive line and you try to find your long-term solutions at inside linebacker, at cornerback. Hopefully you have one at safety with Xavier Watts. If you're keeping Jesse Bates, you're all set for the short term. But I would love to see them sort of build on the strength of the defense that they have identified, and to build, I don't know if you build around both Bijan and Drake London, but, sort of pick one of those guys that are untouchable, because you do need a star on offense for your new quarterback, interim quarterback, whatever you want to call them. And then everything else is kind of up in the air. It's going to depend so much on who comes in here and what their philosophy is, but bring in somebody who you would feel good about starting at least half the season next year at quarterback. Identify who your handful of stars are, build out from the defensive line, and really focus on what can you do to improve this team's depth, so that by the time you're ready to contend again, because I think we all sort of agree, whatever you want to call it, that 2026 is going to be a tough year. It's probably not going to be a great season. So make the investments that you have to make this coming off season. Keep building on the foundation. Don't pivot away from the strength of the last couple of draft classes, et cetera, and say we're going to go in an entirely different direction, because then you're throwing away good work that has been done by this staff. And then try to find something that when you're ready to hit the ground running again in 2027, in 2028, whether it's with Penix, whether it's a quarterback you're going to draft, you do in fact have a solid foundation, and you're not taking a shortcut. You're not trying to trade for a superstar quarterback that becomes available, just because you're getting impatient with the timeline. You're not setting yourself up to say, we're going to throw this thing away in service of this shiny new object. Like, build a good football team, and don't put all of your eggs in one basket with the quarterback, with anything, really. Just don't put yourself in a position where the way forward is a shortcut. It's we're only one piece away. We've got to have that piece right now. Build it solid, front to back. And that's going to require probably also, even though we haven't really talked about it at all, significant investments in the offensive line too, which is something that the Falcons have kind of gotten away with not having to do beyond Bergeron the last few years, but it's probably coming.
Yeah, they've tried to pay their way through it. That they made this. I still think it's odd that they didn't bring back Drew Dahlman at the number that the Bears gave him. I thought that was the number that they would match. I thought if they went, more like 15 million, I was like, okay, I get it. You don't want to do that. The number he got, I thought they could match. So I don't think the merging of a new center with a new quarterback, neither one of them very experienced, has resulted in anything super good there. Although I do think Newsel clearly looks like a capable blocker. Really, the blocking hasn't been the issue with him. It's been more of the protection calls. So maybe we can just move Newsel to guard, and we can solve our guard problems too. But at this point, there's a lot of investments that need to go there. But I don't think you can ever go wrong with trench-heavy investments. That seems to be a strategy that works for a lot of teams. So maybe that's the path that a new staff will take. But I like those ideas. Aaron, what's your initial thoughts here about a path forward for this Falcons team?
Yeah, it's very similar to Dave. I'm a big believer in rebuilding the trenches. I think this offensive line, there's the potential that you're going to have to replace 4 of the 5 starters over the next couple of off seasons. It's an aging unit. And even the one that I'm assuming is going to stick here long term is Chris Lindstrom. He's going to be 30 in 2 years. And so, you got maybe 3, 4, maybe more. We'll see. But typically 31, 32 is when offensive linemen start to slow down. And, you get Todd McClures and you get Jake Matthews that can play well beyond that, but that's not the norm in the NFL. And so you're going to have to sink significant resources in that. I think similar to Dave, I think you got to continue to sink resources into the defensive line. To me, my thought process is kind of similar to what you've seen in Arizona the last couple of years. It hasn't quite paid off in the way that they wanted it to, but you kind of saw Jonathan Gannon in that regime go in there in 23, Kyler Murray coming off the injury, bringing in a bridge quarterback. Now they tossed the keys back to Kyler, and because of the money that the Cardinals had invested in Kyler, they've stuck with that, and that's kind of run its course at this point. And so it's a similar situation with Michael Penix, but because he's going to be on a rookie contract, you're not going to be married to him beyond whatever he does in 2026. And to me, hopefully you pivot, well, not hopefully, but like if you're in a position to pivot in 2027 with another quarterback at the top of that draft, you're in that position to take that swing. And hopefully you can plop that quarterback onto a team that has Bijan Robinson, that has Drake London, has added a couple of pieces elsewhere in the skill position, because you're going to have to replace Tyler Algier and Kyle Pitts and Darnell Mooney and all that stuff, and then replace the offensive line. So it's going to be an ongoing process. But like Dave said, hopefully you can continue to build this defense. To me, it was never a reality where the Falcons would just draft 5 or 4 defensive players and solve their defensive problems, even though I know the defense has had a lot of success this year, certainly exceeded probably all of our expectations in terms of the level of success. It's not over, because we have 5 games of great defensive play and we've had 5 games of not so good defensive play. We forgive the 5 not so good defensive plays because the offense has been generally worse in those games, and so we don't focus on the defense. But like, they've been pretty bad on defense the last couple of weeks. Hopefully things change with Divine Diablo coming back this week. But to me, the defense was always going to be like a 3-year sort of rebuild, with last year kind of being year 1. I don't really count 2024 because to me, those picks, no offense to Ruka Roro, Braylon Trice, and Brandon Dorless, but I never saw those guys as like, oh, these are going to be core pieces. They're like, they're part of the solution, but they're not necessarily the pillars of that solution. And so the hope always with Raheem in them was like, oh, well, the offense is going to be able to hold the fort while we take 3 years to rebuild the defense. And then by the time the defense is ready, the offense will be, firing all cylinders, and that's our path to go into the Super Bowl. And it's like, now it's like, it's going to take 3 years to rebuild the defense. And now you're kind of starting all over on offense. And to me, you bring in a new coaching staff that hopefully an offensive minded coaching staff, that whether that person is going to quote unquote fix Michael Penix, develop the next quarterback that you wind up drafting in 2027, whatever that, and sort of you're just hoping that offensive coaching staff can steward and build up an offense. It's going to be rough next year, which is basically Bijan and Drake and Jameis Winston throwing 37 interceptions or whatever the Falcons have at the bridge quarterback position. Then you have a rookie. He goes through his rookie growing pains in year 1, and then you just hope that maybe you can be in the situation that the New England Patriots are in with Drake May in year 2, and then you make a big jump in year 2, and now you're a playoff team in 2028, and then you can build, and that's your window. And then by that point, you've now had 2 more additional off seasons to rebuild the defense. And so you're hoping it all comes together. 2028 playoffs, 2029 NFC Championship game, 2030 Lombardi Trophy. That's the hope. That's, again, what are the odds that that's going to happen? Probably mathematically like an 8% chance, but hey, that's 8% more than I think the current situation goes. So that's all I got. So
I'd take 8% at a Super Bowl today.
Very generous for that scenario.
I love how you pulled that specific number just right out there. I was like, he's been crunching the numbers. Yeah.
But like, yeah, that's to me the hope that you have going forward. And that's the, basically that's me making my pitch if I was in that room being interviewed by Arthur Blank in terms of what we're going to do. So you just kind of tread water for the next couple of years, and hopefully you get another crack at the quarterback position. And that guy is the savior that we all hoped that Michael Penix was going to be, and unfortunately probably is not going to be because of what happened on Sunday.
Yeah, very unfortunate. Adnan, same question to you. What's your plan? Where are you hoping the direction of the team heads?
Well, first of all, I'm just waiting for someone on Twitter to at one of us or all of us in August of next year after this team signs Jameis Winston or something, and saying, well, I think the Falcons can actually win 11 games this year. It's not too far-fetched. They have the talent. That's not gonna happen. I'd say the chances of that happening are much less than 8%, probably much less than 2%. But yeah, I would, like I said, I would fully embrace a complete rebuild. That does not have to mean that you're completely doing what the Jets did. It doesn't mean that you have to trade Bijan and you have to trade London, but I would give that autonomy and that option to the next coaching staff and general manager, which actually, first things first, get clean house completely and bring in, new people and new minds to do this, because I have zero trust in the decision makers today. And that goes up to Blank, but you're not replacing Blank, so that's out the window. But embrace the full rebuild, embrace it. Know that the next 2 years it's okay if the Falcons are very, very rough over the next 2 years. I would honestly rather take a complete rebuild and a 3 to 4 win season over doing what they've done over the past few years, which is trying to cut those corners, being half in, half out, trying to make those win now moves on a team that's not ready to win now, and for them to be winning 7 to 8 games, because that result is what gets you here where we are today, along with some bad luck. But yeah, I'm completely for rebuilding the trenches. I do not believe that there is such a thing as a wasted investment when you're investing it into the trenches on both ends. Like, the game of football at the end of the day, as analytical as it can get, and I've said this on this show and on the post-game show, I think about 100 times, no matter how analytical things get in this sport and how advanced and modern it gets, the game is won and lost in the trenches. And I would love for the Falcons to actually have a dominant unit on both the offensive and defensive line, for once. Like, normally it's like the O line has been good, but the D line hasn't, been dominant or anything close to the sort as long as I can remember. But yeah, I would go through the trenches. I would absolutely continue to do what they did in the draft last year and continue on with that strategy. But more than anything, just please stop cutting corners on this rebuild. Please stop trying to, press a magic button, and please stop trying to do these like get rich quick schemes in the NFL, because it's not going to work in this sport. All that it'll result in is mediocrity and running on the treadmill. And I'm so sick of this treadmill. I would rather go through a very painful, and I mean, 2026, it's a given. It's going to be a painful 2026, but I would rather also go through a painful 2027 and come out of that, ready to actually do something and ready to have something lasting in 2028 and beyond, versus, all right, let's just try to squabble together this house of cards in these 7 to 8 win seasons. And honestly, as far as I'm concerned, it's like the Braves back in the mid 2010s. And one thing I respect the hell out of the Braves for doing is embracing that tank and embracing that rebuild, where after that 2014, where they saw that, yeah, this isn't working, they completely tore everything apart. They knew it was going to be a very rough few years. They invested fully in the farm system, and the Braves came out of that with, I think, 6 or 7 straight division titles, including a World Series title, starting from 2018 and on. Like, that's the way things should be done. That's what a good organization does. And for the Falcons, it's like, all right, as far as I'm concerned, 2028 needs to be the vision. Like, this team needs to be positioning itself for 2028 and beyond, because you've sort of lost the luxury of doing anything before then because of how you've handled these past 5 seasons.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good thought. And I mean, I think everything you guys have proposed is intriguing. I mean, I think they would be the team, hopefully we'll do some form of this. We'll obviously have to see the direction they go, if they even elect to make changes again. I really don't think they can keep Raheem. I just don't. I don't think that is going to fly on any level. But next season is going to be dicey. I think they should just sort of treat that year as we need to build this year and not focus on winning football games. Obviously, if you can win games, right? No one's saying to intentionally lose games. That just doesn't work. That's not something you should ever do in the NFL. But for once, could we collect some comp picks? Like, we got all these free agents out there. could we just like collect some comp picks for 2027? Could we actually start collecting some extra picks and building for a 2027 draft that can maybe cement this team in the right direction? You know, I know Dave's been working on some quarterback ideas. I mean, to me, I'll go give Malik Willis, $8 million, $10 million, come in, be our bridge quarterback. We'll see what you can do there. I mean, Malik obviously has looked nice in very limited samples. Also, if Malik came here and looked great, it would justify my draft takes from years ago and resurrect that success. So, I'm really pulling for that most of all. That's my long-term strategy ever since Malik has started to look good, is that maybe I can redeem those draft takes from years ago. But I think there could be a path to, maybe you can tag and trade Pitts. Maybe you can, obviously you're not keeping Kirk Cousins. You collect a little bit of money, but you don't really spend it. You get Malik Willis in here for whatever, it costs. I mean, within reason. And you just, look, you invest in the defense, you invest in the trenches, get some blocking tight ends in here, and you build an offense, a rushing focused offense. You've got Drake, so you have one big pass catcher. You're going to have to find another one somewhere, but get Malik Willis in here, run a read option, RPO based offense. You've got Bijan, you've got Malik Willis, who is a threat with his legs. Utilize that dual threat quarterback to take some pressure off of this receiving core, which we know is probably not going to be where it needs to be. And, lean on your offensive line, which at this point, we're probably it's still going to have all these veterans on it. And in the future, that may not be the case, but for now, they still have them. So ground and pound it, invest in this defense, which hopefully is going to be good. It seems like the bones of this defense are far more encouraging than we predicted. And just resist the temptation to push the chips in on 2026. Just let it happen. Don't necessarily spend down your cash. Carry what you can into 2027. Collect some comp picks. And look, best case scenario, Malik Willis looks good. Maybe he can be your long-term backup, or at least be an encouraging bridge. Maybe Penix is healthy and then comes back and lights the world on fire, and then you're feeling fine with some combination of Malik Willis and Penix going into 27, and you invest your pick elsewhere. I mean, I don't know, but I don't think anyone should be expecting 2026 to be a winning season. I think the Falcons would be doing themselves a disservice if they were like pushing hard to try to make that happen. And unless maybe like Penix is just having a miraculous recovery timeline and he's like practicing in August, and it's like, okay, well, he's going to be ready for week 1. Okay, whatever. I still don't think that's wise, but that's kind of the only pathway I could see to this team maybe having an improbable run is if Penix is able to get healthy and direct that improbable run and just become a completely, transcendent Joe Burrow-esque quarterback. And everybody forgets, yes, that the Bengals stuck with Joe Burrow, but what Joe Burrow has shown in between his season-ending injuries is like top 2, top 3 NFL caliber quarterback play. So, as good as I thought some of Penix's games were, I don't think he's ever played a game that rivaled any of Joe Burrow's, best games. So, at this point, not willing to put him in that conversation. But we had one last donation from Adrian Russ. Thank you, Adrian. Says with the $2, Kevin, I've seen reference and mentioned that Cleveland would be a fool to release Kevin Stefanski. I'm curious why you like him as a head coach. Feel the way they've handled their QB situation has been abysmal. Who else do you like for Atlanta? I mean, I think Stefanski is the hostage, more or less, of Cleveland's bad ownership and general managing. And I think Stefanski has shown that he can scheme up a great offense and he can develop quarterbacks. But I really don't know, who to blame in Cleveland because that whole organization just feels kind of cursed. But so he would fit right in here in Atlanta, actually. Like he should be totally prepared for this environment. It's not going to catch him by surprise. He knows how to deal with a curse situation. Hopefully he's learned some sort of anti-curse things so he can do that when he gets here, can cleanse the building, and then we can roll forward in a positive direction. But I just think Kevin Stefanski is a good coach, and you're basically like going to be able to get a good coach that's maybe not going to be at the height of his, hype because, again, he's been fired. So it could be an opportunity to buy low on a guy who I think is a very good head coach, but has been kind of saddled with a sad situation in Cleveland for many years now.
Kevin Stefanski has worked with the Vikings, the Browns, and you're hoping for the Falcons. So he's got like 3 out of the 5 boxes checked for all the cursed franchises. He's just got to get the Chargers and the Jets on his belt, and he's good to go. He's going to complete the entire Infinity Gauntlet.
Yeah, so he's got to get here soon if he wants to get to those other teams before he retires. So, but yeah, I like Stefanski. I think he's a good coach, and the Falcons.
I feel like he's aged like a lot. He's aged like a president since he's been with the Browns. Like you see him on the sidelines now, and it's just like, it's like it's like first term Obama, like at the start, versus like Obama when he was like leaving office.
Yeah,
and honestly, if you went through 7 quarterbacks and your owner was Jimmy Haslam, you would probably look like that too, for sure.
I don't know how he hasn't just like stormed out of the building at this point, like, and just been like, I'm done with this. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, how he's handling this quarterback situation is crazy. It's like, you think he's the one saying Shedeur Sanders isn't gonna play? You think he's like, I don't really think Kevin Stefanski is like, no, I will absolutely never play Shedeur Sanders. I hate this man. Like, I still don't understand why the Browns drafted him. Like, it seems like they drafted him to just, like, spite him and, like, force him to never play in the NFL, which that does actually track with Jimmy Haslam. So, it could very well be the case. But that whole situation is so strange. Stefanski doesn't take me as the type to act like that. I really feel like it's a ownership situation going on there. But, I mean, what do I know? So... But guys, we've been doing our best to put everything in context, to give you guys a dose of reality, but also a dose of optimism here at the end, where there are ways for this team to move forward. It doesn't need to take 5 years. Could be 2, could be 3, but I think in order to have that, it's kind of an oxymoron, right? In order to have that shorter timeline, I think they have to be more aggressive and willing to be sort of like worse in the short term in order to get better in the long term. And I think the biggest mistake that this team has made since the end of the Dan Quinn era is sort of this refusal to ever really start over. It seemed like they just wanted to keep it rolling in one stage or another through each coach and never really get like a clean reset. I mean, we still haven't really gotten one. I mean, the Matt Ryan thing was so poorly handled. Like, I mean, I can't believe it. Like, still how that went down. I mean, thankfully the Browns stepped in to save Arthur Blank from himself on the Deshaun Watson thing. Because the only thing that could possibly be worse is if we had Deshaun Watson right now. So that would still be worse than what's happened, guys. I guarantee that. But fortunately, we don't have to go down that path. But this is the man that's been making the decisions in Atlanta that was absolutely going to trade and give Deshaun a big contract. Now, it wouldn't have been fully guaranteed in Atlanta, at least, but yeah, rough. But at any rate, guys, we do appreciate you hanging out with us. I do have an odds update for you on this game on Sunday. The Falcons officially 1.5 point underdogs to the New Orleans Saints now. So never thought we'd be there with this Saints team, but unfortunately we have arrived per FanDuel. Falcons 1.5 point underdogs.
The only thing left that they can take from me is getting swept by the Saints this year. That's it. That's all that's left.
Yeah. So hopefully, as long as they win one of those Saints games, that will stave off the worst of it. But I don't have any faith in Kirk Cousins whatsoever. So, we will see how that goes this weekend. But before we sign off, again, thanks to everyone for hanging out. We really appreciate you guys for hanging along with us and just surviving what this football team has put us through. As someone said, it does feel like an abusive relationship at times. We are definitely in that state with this team. But I do want to thank everyone for making the time tonight, especially our guests, Aaron Freeman at Locked On Falcons. Aaron, anything else you want to let the people know about tonight?
All I'll say is I've been predicting for like 5 months that Week 18 Saints game is going to be a loss because that's what the Falcons do. Whenever they have a meaningful Week 18 game that they have to win, they always lose it. And so I'm just telling you, Adnan, just, start going to therapy now so that you can be in a position to get ahead of that, in Week 18. So that is what people have to look forward to. If you want to get a breakdown of that eventual Week 18 loss, make sure you continue to watch Locked On Falcons, YouTube, wherever you find it. That's what we got. We'll be talking about, not only these upcoming games of what, if anything, to look forward to over the next 7 weeks with Kirk Cousins at the helm, but also looking ahead to the future, and hopefully there is some light at the end of this tunnel.
Yes, that is the hope.
Train.
Yeah, it's just an oncoming train. It's gonna flatten us. Yeah,
that's a good analogy. I know I'm gonna steal it, so I appreciate it.
That's a good one. I like that. Yes. Also, of course, Adnan Ikic here at Say Which Way. Adnan, anything else from you before we sign off tonight?
Yeah, you guys remember when Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris said, "Oh, we got to get our quarterback now because we're not going to be picking this high anymore." Well, they were technically correct. Monkey's paw curls. We're not going to be picking in the top 10. We're not going to be picking anywhere close to it.
Joke's on you. Can't pick in the top 10 if you don't have a pick. So
exactly. So, yeah. Hey, big brain moves there. So they got us. They got us on that one. They didn't technically lie, but I will say shout out to all of our old school fans who were there in the 80s watching this terrible football team back then as well, because I'm sure nothing says 80s like two putrid NFC South or two putrid Falcons and Saints teams going at it with nothing on the line except for just their sheer hatred of each other.
Yep. It's really the purest form of this rivalry. So I am looking forward to that. We also, of course, have the man himself, Dave Choate at the Falcoholic. Dave, love to have you on as always. Sorry we couldn't make it a more positive show, but we appreciate your takes nonetheless. Anything else that you want to let the people know about?
No, I'm working on a piece that's, also going to be depressing about sort of what now, like what matters over the last 7 weeks. There's a long section about what Kirk Cousins can do for his career if you want to talk about how grim it's going to get. But you can look forward to that. And of course, we will have Falcon Saints coverage. And, I think it's Ralph Malborough, a friend of mine and a Saints fan, which I know is an oxymoron, always says, you get the best games when these teams are really down in the mud together. So I am looking forward to what's going to be a profoundly stupid game on Sunday. So stay tuned for that.
It's going to be gross, and we're just going to get down in the mud with these football teams and just battle it out. The battle everyone's been waiting for, the toilet bowl between Tyler Shuck and Kirk Cousins in Week 12 of the NFL. The Week 18 version is going to be even
put
better.
That together.
Yeah.
It's those two quarterbacks. Like,
yep.
I know that intellectually, but my heart didn't believe it until just now. So
yeah. So we will survive that somehow. We'll be here for you guys. I'm Kevin at Falcoholic. Kevin, thanks again, everyone, for tuning into the Falcoholic Live presented by FanDuel. We will be back with a game previewing this toilet bowl coming up on Sunday. So look for that. And then next week for Thanksgiving week, it'll be a bit of a truncated schedule with the holiday. And, come on, it's this team. Like, if this team was like really in the playoff hunt, probably be feeling like I should pump out some more shows next week. But as it stands, we're going to try to do Tuesday takes. We'll have a game preview for you, but probably no live next Wednesday, given it's the day before Thanksgiving. Everyone's going to be traveling, but we'll be back to our normal schedule the week after, and we'll continue to take you through this truly cursed 2025 Falcons season. But thank you guys so much for joining us. Please subscribe. If you want to support the show, you can do so. Patreon.com/Falcoholic Live, or you can join the YouTube channel memberships here. You can also leave us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. That would be cool. But yeah, again, we just really appreciate you guys. It makes it a lot easier when we can all get in here and have our group therapy sessions together. So we've all been scarred, and punished by our love of this stupid football team. And unfortunately, if we could have left, we probably all would have left by now. So there's no escape. So all we have is each other, and that's where we're gonna lean the remainder of the season. So thank you guys again. We'll see you next time on the Falcoholic Live. Have a great night, folks.